Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is March 5, 2023. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. An honor and a pleasure to be here with Matt McCalpin. Where in the heck you calling in from, Matt?
I'm in Traverse City, Michigan, Jerry.
That is cool. My home state. First question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Mm, to feel good.
Hey, quoting James Brown, you can't go wrong there. It's not like the wimpy white boy Bob Dylan says, how does it feel? It took the black man to feel confident. I feel good.
Yeah.
But you know,
Tell us how you feel.
the women trump us all. Memphis Minnie says, I feel like balling the jack. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
um, by accident.
That is good. I don't get that answer very often. But that is sort of a description other than by accident. What form is it in? Does it matter? Like, is there one you sort of like better?
Um, Personally, like from people who truly
Yeah,
know about what they're talking about. Um,
yeah.
Dedicated people to any given thing. If they're
Uh,
passionate about it, I like to hear it from them
Live experience. That's good. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
because there's so much unknown, and we're trying to make this huge library in our brains of things that we understand because it makes us feel comfortable, I think, because
Yeah.
there's so much unknown.
Do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
A little bit of both,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, some of these questions at the beginning are either or, and it can be both. It always depends. There's many possible answers, but it's sort of your hunch and your guess what I'm after. How would you fill in the blank, Matt? I don't know what I think until I.
I don't know what I think until I mess it up a couple times.
That's good. Mess it up. Yeah, because McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. Mess it up a couple times. That's sort of like, have you ever read Samuel Beckett?
No.
Well, he has a famous line that goes, fail once, then fail again better.
Yeah. I, yeah, if I could do it another way, I would, but it's usually just the way things shake out.
Do thoughts create emotions?
Yes.
Can humans think without language?
Yes.
So Chomsky says that a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down?
Give it time.
Yeah. It's a stupid question. I know it's both and it depends again. But are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
Uh, Feeling, but I feel like that's changing
Yeah.
year by year.
You mean for the good or for the bad?
Probably for the bad.
Yeah. Turing asked these two questions in the 50s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
Hmm. If you want it to be,
Yeah. The second Turing question is, can machines think?
yeah,
Yeah. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
happiness.
Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
Wow, that's a cool question.
But what's your hunch? What's your guess?
That like I'm all for giving you specific answers, but that one in particular, I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
think we truly know.
yeah.
That's that's deeper than we know. Or there's some
See,
people who probably know, but
yeah. No,
that's
it
too
there
deep.
it's neuroscientists are always trying to figure that out, but,
Yeah,
what's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
speed of light.
The poet Audre Lorde said, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." Yvonne Rainer responded, said, "You can if you expose the tools." What new tool do you suggest?
Hmm. Uh, partnership.
It's good. I like that. What new toy do you suggest?
Sunglasses.
When Sylvester Stallone came to Hollywood, he had 59 cents in his pocket and he went and bought some sunglasses.
Good call.
What do you worry about when you bet?
Oh, sorry, Jerry. That one cut out for a second.
Yeah. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Uh, I don't. I just sleep.
That's good. McLuhan learned from the poet Ezra Pound that artists, musicians, artists, writers, are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we might be able to learn to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, Matt, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Yeah, I maybe we think that other things are going to be more fulfilling,
Yeah.
but they're not.
Do artists have moral obligation?
No.
It's pretty good, dude. Everybody says yes, and I'm like, no, they don't. It's amazing how many people say they go, oh, they have a moral obligation to themselves. Well, I guess that's true, but I think that's the purpose of art is to help us readjust what is we're obligated to and
Right.
challenge.
Right. Yeah, I consider myself a creative art loving person to the utmost, and I'm starting to find more and more that there are certain categories of art that I know nothing about, and I end
Yeah.
up appreciating them because in that moment, I realized I knew nothing about it, and I
Yeah.
thought that I would, but I didn't.
Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Old ideas.
Yeah. Matt, can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Um, yeah, I remember being on a beach and I was sick and all the other kids were playing and I was underneath a blanket with it kind of cracked open to the side and I was very very sick so I couldn't participate in the beach, but I was able to just like open up that blanket and kind of peek my head outside and watch all the
Yeah.
kids playing.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
I'm going to commit to choosing an answer rather than saying both, and I'm going to say it's a curse.
Yeah. Can you tell me someone within your immediate family, then someone outside your immediate family who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model? And what specifically was that impact?
Um, my dad, his specific impact was just good music, and um, outside of my immediate family, I would say um, a man named Carl Schroeder, who was my professor, I guess, my teacher in music school, and he taught me both how to take music very serious and not take it serious at all, and all at once.
Wow, that's heavy. Yeah, because the word play is what you do. You don't go to work, you play music. You don't work music.
Right?
So was he in high school or college? What era was that?
College. He's retired now, but he's a legendary jazz pianist, and he ended up in Los Angeles teaching at Musicians Institute. And it's kind of random what teacher you get, but if you got Carl Schroeder, you were you were lucky, and he was just incredible and one of the
You mean
funny.
you this was you went to college then MIT or you went from high school to MIT?
I I went straight out of high school. Yep.
To MIT.
Hmm.
So that was your college. You didn't go to college.
Right.
That's pretty good. How many years were you at MIT?
Two.
Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
No.
Do you pray?
I have, but I don't.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
What's up?
Do evil people exist or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Wow. I'm gonna go with option number two on that one.
The question really is, Matt, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Detroit born Francis Ford Coppola says he stole this from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you, Matt, advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I'm gonna say I am 100% on board with Mr. Watts' logic.
Yeah.
I've always I've always felt that in comparison to the other ones you listed off.
Yeah.
I'm definitely on board with the not acknowledging, do not engage
Yeah.
philosophy.
James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Faulkner said years later, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?"
Because some of those people who are being used as vehicles for evil found a really clever way to make lots of money, and
Hi, boss.
got us hooked.
Got us hooked. That's good.
Yeah, made us forget.
Okay, I'm
It's
all done.
amazing. Really good.
I'll be ready.
You really cut to the punchline here, dude. So now walk through, Matt, your sort of path in life, your calling. What was the tipping point? Your dad's playing you good music, as you said, or great music. What's he playing it on? What format? And at what point are you going, "Hey, I want to do this"? Are they going, "Yeah, take this kind of instrument lesson"? Or are you going, "I want to take a listen"? Just sort of walk us through that path where it got to that tipping point and you says, "That's my calling."
Yeah, so my dad played vinyl rock and roll records out of the basement constantly. It's like the sound of really loud music being played on vinyl records coming out of our smoke-filled basement was just like, that's a very vivid memory for me. And the way that music sound, like Rolling Stones, JJKL, Frank Zappa, Grateful Dead, Led Zeppelin, Jay Giles band, stuff like that. Like the way those records sound, especially on like really nice old speakers, I'm still like always referencing that sound.
What city is that?
That's Traverse City, Michigan.
Oh, that's Traverse City. Cool.
Yeah, I was born and raised here, and I moved away. I've lived several other places, but now I moved. My wife and I and our kids, we moved back about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember listening to that, and nobody in my house played guitar, but there were like 3 guitars always just like in the corner. I think because they thought they looked cool. My dad's friend Rick came over and he played, and so he tuned the guitar. So then we had a tuned guitar in the corner, and then I remember everyone coming in the living room and gathering because I couldn't hold the guitar, but I would lay it down on the floor, and I taught myself how to play "Smoke on the Water" and is it Aqualung? That's
Yeah.
I learned those two like just with my thumb and like my finger, just playing it like a piano, basically flat on the ground.
You were doing Stanley Jordan.
Yeah.
Tapping.
And
So you mean you self-taught? They didn't encourage you. You just sort of wandered over there. What age are you doing that at?
probably like 7 or 8. And
Yeah.
then Rick came back to the house. They would have parties, and I'd just be waiting for Rick to show up again to show me the next thing. And then like he showed me how to hold it and not play it on the floor. And then he taught me Day Tripper.
Yeah.
Uh, and then the E chords, E minor and E. And then that was pretty much all I needed from that point on to just like hold it properly and just like kind of start figuring more things out.
But you're doing that and your peers are, you start playing with your friends, or you're playing in the school band, or what? And where did you go, "This is my life calling"? Where was that? That's it.
Yeah, that was these kids approach me in the middle school, because like all the schools combine when you get in middle school. So there's like hundreds of kids that you didn't know before, not just like the same 12 kids from your elementary school. So these kids who are now my friends still to this day, they approach me in the hallway and like, we heard you play guitar. We have a band.
Yeah.
We play punk rock music, which at that point was like Blink 182. And that whole scene that was it. Green Day. And I went over there with my guitar and I only knew Day Tripper and the E chords and like some riffs. And I was just kind of faking it. And then I kind of realized that my buddy was playing this chord that moved everywhere and he didn't have to change anything with his fingers. He just moved it. And he told me that's called a power chord. And it is essentially Green Day and Blink 182's entire career. And it's one chord and you just move it to various places. And that was like, that was it. Because I could figure out riffs, but I wasn't sure how they were getting the chord sound. And so we started a punk rock band and we had a place to go once a week. And we would just, who knows what that sounded like, but yeah, just playing music in the basement with my friends and living off power chords for several years.
But you know, this is the typical parental advice. Dude, we're glad you're pursuing the arts, but what are you going to fall back on and make a living with? Were you just saying, hey, I'm in this to make my living? Or you're like, no, I've got to do something else and have this on the side? You were confident from day one?
I pretty much was, for better or for worse. I remember actually at that time we had to write like our year project for like writing our language arts class was your career, and like you had to research it and like map it out, like what you were going to do, what you were going to school for, and then what your career was going to be in your life. And I chose musician and I got it back. I got like a C or a B, like some like not so good grade, but not failing. And it just said, sounds more like a hobby, not a career path.
Well, that's my theory is you want to get your life and your job as mixed up as possible. You know, usually the advice is, oh, don't take your job home with you, you know. And so I think that's
Right.
what, when you're truly deep in something, are one and the same.
True.
So
Yeah.
then, Matt, you eventually write music. You go out to MIT. We can get into that more and get into music more, but let's stay on this for a second. You eventually learn to write your own music and your own lyrics. You write both.
Yeah.
A screenwriting teacher told me right there at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor that great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play when you're writing a song?
Oh, I think a huge role.
Well, how do you understand what it is you're doing? I mean, how do you navigate it? If it has a huge role, can you suss it out? What does it mean to you to write a song?
I think it means, you take any given topic or feeling and you make sure you stay true to that rather than kind of piecing random things together. For me personally, sometimes when stuff comes off a little too cryptic or technical, it kind of fails to move me as in comparison to something that is very intentional and that it's pretty obvious the vibe or the concept here.
Yeah.
The sooner you can deliver that to your audience, and hopefully they can easily make a decision if they're going to stick with you or not.
Well,
if
that's
you're alive.
perfect follow-up, Matt, because Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your listener when you're writing your song?
I'm not necessarily thinking of the listener, but I am thinking of I want I want it I want it to be honest. I want my art to feel like it's honest with myself, if that makes sense. It's kind of a weird way to
Yeah,
say it, but um,
yeah,
I don't want it to come across as trying to be something that I'm not.
yeah. Well, McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness, like knife and fork extend our teeth, and the shutter in a camera extends our eyelid, and even like maybe religion or philosophy extends consciousness, non-tangible. What does the guitar extend for you? What humanness?
Um, I think whether you call it meditation or not, but I think like sometimes it's nice to just disappear and not think about anything.
Yeah,
Like I've realized that that's the point I'm trying to get to. The fulfillment comes from this place of you realize you've just checked out.
yeah,
Sometimes that's good for you to do. So after all these years of thinking about music and like what am I supposed to be thinking of right now, I'm just trying to achieve that moment of where I'm not thinking about anything
yeah.
at all.
Yeah, that's exactly what a great Michigander told me. Don Preston, he played keyboards with the Mothers and a lot of other people. He played with Elvin Jones and
Oh wow.
helps he's helped score the film Apocalypse Now. He's
Wow.
about 90 years old, and a couple years ago when I interviewed him with all these same questions, he said that very thing. He says, "Don't think." But it's hard. It sounds good for you to say that and for him to say that, huge amount of age between you two. You're both
Uh,
saying, but how do you acquire that? But I mean, how can you? That's like Bridget Bardot says, when I make love, I don't think. And I'm like, good luck. You're doing the most sensuous thing a human can do. How do you turn your thinking off? How is that even accomplishable?
you have to practice for sure, whatever it is. Because I used to get frustrated when I was young, and I would ask, very great jazz musicians, what do you like? What scale are you playing there? Or what are you thinking of? Like what pattern, or And a lot of times the greats, they'd look at you and start playing. They'd be like, just play, man. And I'd be like, okay. And I realized that they are totally right. That
Yeah,
answer is totally valid, but you need to work to get there. You have to be consistent with things and commit yourself. And I don't know anything about meditation. I wish I did, but from what I understand, it doesn't happen overnight, and you got to work at it pretty
yeah.
hard, and you have to learn lots of things, and you have to just consistently practice, and then you start to meditate and check out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like meditators say, now think about not thinking. Well, you're thinking about not thinking. How can you do, that's almost an ironic twist, but I think what you're saying, practice is such an important thing. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why Thelonious Monk said music is math. And I mean, the last thing you really think about when you hear Monk is something mathematical. I feel it's like completely a sensual feeling thing. But
Hmm.
he knows which, like my friend says it best. He says, Thelonious Monk heard all the same notes Charlie Parker heard, but only decided to play some of them.
Absolutely.
But again, is he thinking about that? There's got to be some sort of Rolodex in his mind going, okay, I'll play this note Now I'll leave those 5 out. Now I'll play this note. You
Yeah,
know.
I mean, honestly, Monk may have been thinking or being more intentional than Charlie Parker was. I mean,
That's amazing to think that. Yes,
yeah,
indeed. Yeah, because Monk, the great story is he's on the bandstand and he nods out. And the player next to him, it comes to his part to play his solo, and the guy next to him just elbows him, and he just wakes up and plays his solo, you know. So it's like his solo is an extension of his dreaming. Because I
yeah.
think what you were talking about is that similar to daydreaming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
What's the function of music?
Um, it's it's I don't know. Music is the best. It's just a beautiful. Uh, it's a beautiful part of life. That's
Yeah,
thankfully somebody discovered at some point.
yeah. Well, my friend says the 3 T's of music are technique, theory, and taste. So you've learned how to play the guitar very well. You know what chords, structure. How does one acquire taste?
Hmm.
I mean, the other two are something you brought up, Matt, and that's practice. You had to practice to learn your technique. Like, you know what I was really impressed with? That when Jeff Beck died, you played a Jeff Beck song on your Facebook.
Oh yeah.
What song was that?
That's Blow by Blow.
That is the song called Blow by Blow.
Uh, yeah.
Well, this is what impressed me. You weren't even plugged in, were you? It was an electric guitar not plugged in. So
Yeah.
to me, you were showing the beauty of Jeff Beck was, yeah, he depends on volume and feedback. But I'm going to show you that he actually knew what he was doing chordally, because I went into the Jeff Beck, you know, uh what do you call that? Deep dive into him after I grew up listening to him. Immediately, he came off surface level. He's just a tricks player. He's just playing all these tricks. And I know he's doing something deeper. But what you did was make me realize, no, this guy was good. In fact, my friend talked to Frank Zappa's sister, Candy, and he said she told him that one day Frank was in their kitchen with Jeff Beck. And Frank turned to Candy, his little sister, and he says, "This is Jeff. He's the greatest guitar player in the world."
Well,
That's how Frank introduced Jeff to his Candy.
yeah, and that comes from none of the T's that you listed. You missed a T, or may
Which
possibly.
one?
Uh, there's tone and there's touch, and there's also time.
Yeah.
And those are the 3 T's that Jeff Beck has mastered. And
Yes. That's
they have
good.
nothing to do with skill. He was a virtuoso, but it was almost like he used his virtuosic powers to be like just have more of a feel thing rather
Yeah.
than like a shredding sense.
He's a total field player. I mean, he not total. He was technically very good, but he was a feeling player. So then back to that. That's good. See, because really what this exercise is Matt, is me and you trying to reinvent my questions or reword them. So,
Oh yeah.
what 3 new T's could you add to the 3 existing T's? You knocked it out of the ballpark, dude. But now back to the question, how does one acquire taste?
Um, I think you have to reach a point where you stop thinking so much about yourself and your like specific thing that you're trying to do and just really listen. There's times when you need to not listen and you need to develop your own thing, but I think listening to other people um, as much as possible, and like you said, doing a deep dive
Yeah.
uh, into other artists that you may or may not like is important.
That's the answer I get the most is exposure. But it's interesting how you went from your dad's exposing you to, let's just say, hard rock or rock and roll, to you gravitating towards funk.
Mm.
You know, you've gained a taste to go that direction. You know, so I mean, is that basically exposure? How did you acquire a taste in funk as opposed to, you know, going straight jazz or various, you know, straight pop or staying with your punk roots?
Yeah, it was later exposure because when I moved to LA is when I got exposed to funk from several key people, and that was a whole new exposure that I don't think I would have really gotten if I had, just stayed here or done something else. It definitely wasn't going to come from my household or like my friends in Michigan. So yeah, I think LA music.
But was it teachers or peers in
It was
LA?
both. There were some
Both?
teachers. Yeah, yep. There was
Who were
teachers.
they playing for you specifically? P-Funk or Sly or who?
Uh, yeah. So Ross Bolton, who's just an absolute legend. Rest in peace, Ross Bolton from Musicians Institute. Um, he was the guy who, like, every teacher would openly tell you, you cannot teach funk, but Ross Bolton can. And so he
Really?
did clinics and he had classes, and I just like followed him around with a wah-wah pedal, and he would start every class. He'd walk in with a boombox, and I think he was playing CDs out of the boombox, but he'd walk in and he would have a song for the day. Um, and he'd walk in, leave it playing, set it down, get out his guitar, and then start playing along with it. And then just kind of, he'd shut it off and be like, that's the song we're going to learn today. He'd give us the artist and the history of the song. And so the first time he did that, the first time I ever met him in his first class, it was If You Want Me to Stay by Sly. And that just like blew my mind. And
Pre
then
the Peppers playing it, or is it post Peppers?
this would have been after Peppers had covered it, but I never
Yeah.
even knew Peppers' version at that point.
Wow, because you know the way I met you was because you did a cover of "In Time" by Sly,
Hmm.
and
Yeah, and
I'm
the
like,
cool thing about MI is I could directly go to the library where he was getting those CDs, and then you could check them out. Like, he'd tell you what the album was, so I the next day went and checked out a copy of Fresh from the MI library. And yeah, the next class, it was Soul Power by James Brown.
yeah,
So, but I thought that was very key and very important that he wasn't just coming in, showing it to us on paper, showing us the part,
yeah,
and then having us all sit there and play the part with no band. He played the original recording in its entirety loud, and he strummed along to it and like with a smile on his face. So we heard the song, and then we played it with a professional rhythm section. We didn't
amazing.
just stay in our chairs. Each student had to get up on stage with the rhythm section, play the song. And that's probably why people said that Ross was the best at teaching that style that is notorious for not being able to be taught.
So that's where you were first exposed to the meters?
The meters, I'll never forget when I got exposed to the meters. It was in LA during this time. I hadn't heard them yet. And there was one kid who we knew who had a car, which was like crazy in LA. Like none of us had cars, but he had a car and he was really cool. He was from Northern California. His name was Will, and he had a bunch of CDs, and we're blasting around LA in his car. It was the first time I'd been in a car since moving out there. And he's playing the Meters. I can't remember which song it was, but I just remember not being able to contain myself after like 30 seconds, and I had to ask him like what we were listening to, and he just handed me the CD in the back seat, and he let me take it that day. And it was just a greatest hits. It was like the
Yeah.
essential cuts
Yeah.
of the Meters, but that that blew me away as well.
Yeah. So, really cool, Matt. I appreciate your help here. You're teaching me a lot. And it was Ross white or black?
Ross was white.
Wow.
Hmm.
McLuhan has an interesting thing. I'm not saying it's correct or not. I'm just asking your thoughts on this with the word taste in it. He says, song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference. Any comment?
So this is just for music. This is not talking about instrumental music, obviously.
It's not clear what he's saying. I mean, you can watch Marshall talk about James Brown on the Dick Cavett show on YouTube with Truman Capote. It's pretty amazing. But Marshall was really aware of popular music and how it changed people in the 60s. You know, it was much more like what it did to your parents. It was much more than just wallpaper, you know, in the background.
Yeah.
They lived that music. That was part of their lifestyle.
Yeah.
So when he says song is slowed down speech, he's sort of speaking metaphorical, but he's really saying the reason we have different musical taste is connected to language difference. So we do have different musical taste. We don't sound like gamelan music. American music doesn't sound like gamelan music. And, you know, Indian Ravi Shankar music doesn't sound like Brazilian music. So there's
Right.
different musical taste. What does that boil down to? Is he's saying it's language difference. It could be other things.
Yeah, I wouldn't say like language as far as a speaking and written word of a culture. Maybe, but just more so the origins of the rhythms and melodic structure of any given area. They're just so far apart that the music is different.
Well, that's good because you touched on the next question perfectly. Copeland says the four ingredients of music are melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. So just going with those four, how do you integrate those four when you're writing a song? Yeah, do you lean towards, you know, melody, harmony, rhythm, or tone color more, or are they all, you know, perfectly balanced? What's your basic like preference, or, you know, it's basically integration. How do you integrate the four? Is there one that's more dominant when what in the ritual of writing a song, or, you know, gravitating towards funk over, you know, punk?
Yeah, I think if you have a great rhythmic foundation and you have a great melody and a great lyric, if you have those three things, the rest should hopefully fall into place. Uh, I used to write music in the opposite way, where it was more harmonic based and color based.
Yeah.
Um, but that seems like a different style of songwriting. And so now I've kind of flipped it the other way around and simplified, like almost if you have a great melody, um, and then you focus on the rhythm that you put underneath it, the groove, the rest should hopefully be not that big of a thing to think about.
Yeah. But it's interesting. Do you know what changed you? What shifted you from harmonic and color based to rhythmic and melody based?
Honestly, moving from a jazz city to I moved from Kalamazoo, Michigan, which is like a really great jazz scene at the university at Western Michigan.
Yeah.
And then I moved straight from there to Nashville. And Nashville, I hate pigeonholing Nashville as just country. I would say it's more of just like a songwriter and studio atmosphere.
Yeah.
Just lots of great songwriters and studios, and so I started to see the joy in that, and like just songwriting. It doesn't have to be country or Americana.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and I just realized that I was starting to gravitate towards um, artists that had strong melodies in all their songs, where like
Yeah.
they may have come up with this melody before they even had the lyric.
Yeah. That's like they asked, the Brill building in New York where they just cranked out all the great songs. In the 50s and the 60s, they asked the Brill building songwriters, what comes first, the melody or the lyrics? And they would go, the phone call. Like, we need a new song about this. So that's interesting. It was sort of like your location was dictating your learning process from Kalamazoo jazz to Nashville songwriting. But going back to tone color, how would you describe what tone color is in layperson's terms, not in musical terms? What is tone color?
It's it's just the character of the voice. Just like everybody has voices sounds different.
Yeah. So back to Monk, he says there's no wrong notes. Any comment?
It's true. Accurate.
Miles Davis talks about the space between notes. How do you navigate silence? I mean, George Clinton says funk is the absence of. We can. You're in a world where shredders, are a huge part of guitar playing. There's a lot of notes. How do you navigate silence in your playing and your writing?
Breathe.
Breathe.
Just stop playing.
Stop playing.
Just stop moving your fingers. I don't know how long this was pegged for, Jerry, but I got a call coming up soon. So
Yeah.
I probably got time for a few more.
Okay. Well, we'll have to do a part 2 sometime. What's more fundamental, music or language?
Music is a language.
Yeah. Yeah, I usually do 90 minutes and it was noted that way. So let's just schedule a part 2 sometime.
That works for me.
Well, why don't we close out with this one then? Ben Ratliff is a music writer. He says, I mean sound as it has long functioned among jazz players, as a mystical term of art, as in every musician finally needs a sound, a full and sensible embodiment of their artistic personality, such that it can be heard at best in a single note. So, me and you heard Miles, we could go, that's Miles. And Ben said, well, he's fragile and pointed. Coltrane is slightly undercooked and urgent. If a music writer was going to describe Matt's sound in 2 words, what 2 words would you feel most honored? They got it. What I'm after, what I accomplished. Matt Sound in 2 words.
A deep song.
Deep song, yeah. Super cool. Well, Matt, it's been a pleasure. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I am going to send you some dates so we can schedule part 2. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jerry. That was a lot of fun. Thanks for those questions.
All right.